tomorrow is the August 11th primary election. This is the opportunity for Minnesotans to choose which candidates will appear on the November general election ballot. Quick word about that. As I travel around the state, I hear from a number of people from time to time who say, as to the general election, that they don't like who the candidates are. They don't like what's on the menu. This is an opportunity to shape who and what is on the menu for the general election. So I really urge Minnesotans to vote in the primary election. The goal of our office is to work with our many partners and in the counties and the city level and towns across the state to make sure that Minnesotans continue to enjoy elections that are fair, accurate, honest, and secure. I'm joined today by Elections Director Paul Linnell, Election Security Navigator Bill Ekblad, and Voter Outreach Director Melanie Hazelip, known to many of you. We're all here to make sure that Minnesotans are ready and know how, when, and where they can vote. I'll start with the exciting and fresh news of the day. As of this morning, just before this event, we can now say that 206,196 Minnesotans have already voted in the August 11th primary. That's 206,196. That is the highest number of early votes for a primary election in a non-presidential election year in Minnesota. There are still about 213,000 ballots outstanding. So our message to folks who are at home right now with the ballot in their hand that maybe they've ordered and they intended to vote it by mail from home, our message is please deliver that ballot by tomorrow or have someone you know and trust deliver it for you by 5 p.m. tomorrow, election day. Remember, we are not a postmark state. Some are, we are not. Our rule is and always has been that the ballot has to get there by election day. So make sure if you still have one that you're hand delivering it or you're having someone that you know and trust hand deliver it. If any Minnesotans have already sent that ballot back by mail and want to make sure that it was delivered, you don't have to wonder, you don't have to say a prayer. You can go to our website and track your ballot at mnvotes.gov. Just like an Amazon package, just like a UPS package, you can track that ballot. So today, of course, is the last day to vote in person early. And local election officials will be open all over Minnesota until 5 p.m. tonight for early voting. To find out your location, you can go to our website at mnvotes.gov. For those who are voting on election day, tomorrow, August 11th, remember, as always, the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If a voter is in line at the polling place as of 8 p.m., that voter can still vote. That has always been our rule. And again, you can find your polling place easily at our website at mnvotes.gov. As a reminder, in order to vote, you have to be 18 or older, a U.S. citizen, a resident of Minnesota for at least 20 days, and not currently incarcerated for a felony conviction, and your voting rights cannot have been revoked by a judge. You must also, of course, register to vote, and you can register in Minnesota at your polling place on election day. For more information about how to do that and what you need to do that, you can go to our website, again, mnvotes.gov. At this point, I will hand it over to our Minnesota State Elections Director, Paul Linnell.
Thank you, Secretary Simon. My name is Paul Linnell, and I'm the Director of Elections with the Office of the Secretary of State. In Minnesota, our elections are conducted locally by officials in counties, cities, and towns across the state. Our team works to support local elections officials as they prepare to administer this election. There are roughly 3,000 polling places that will be open across Minnesota on election day. Polling places will be fully staffed with well-trained election judges, ready to welcome the first voters into the polling place bright and early at 7 a.m. tomorrow and to serve voters throughout the day until the close of polls at 8 p.m. Minnesota law clearly defines who is and who is not allowed in the polling place on election day. Election judges and election officials ensure that only those authorized persons are present in and around the polling place and that voting remains calm and orderly throughout the day. Local election officials have been busy the last several weeks training election judges, preparing equipment and materials for election day, and administering absentee and early voting. This is the first election where every voter in the state had the opportunity to participate in early voting by casting their ballot into a ballot counter starting 18 days before election day. Early voting has been a popular option for voters, and the new process has gone smoothly thus far. We expect that to continue today and expect the same out at the polls tomorrow. Tomorrow night, election results will be reported on our website, mnvotes.gov, starting after the polls close at 8 p.m. Counties will be working hard to get these unofficial results posted as quickly as possible. But the priority is always accuracy over speed. There are a few details that we want to highlight about how the results reporting process unfolds on election night. After the close of polls, election judges at the polling place review voter check-in counts against the ballots cast to ensure that the numbers are balanced. Results totals are then generated for that precinct, typically through the printing of a report from the voting equipment at the polling place. Election judges then return those unofficial results to the county election office. But before those results are posted online, they must be combined with the results from ballots cast during early voting and ballots cast by mail. All absentee and mail ballots, including any that are dropped off and received by mail or received by mail on election day, must first be reviewed by absentee ballot boards. They are also cross-checked against the polling place rosters to confirm that the voter did not cast a ballot at the polling place before they are counted. Only after both absentee and early voting totals and polling place totals are available for a precinct can the county enter those results into the Secretary of State's secure election reporting system. From there, the unofficial results are published to the Secretary of State's public election night results webpage, again, mnvotes.gov, and are available to the public and the media for reporting. The results posted on that webpage will refresh on election night in 10-minute intervals. In many counties, results are uploaded in batches of precincts after all absentee vote counting is completed. It should not be surprising to see results posted for just a small number of precincts in the early hours after the polls close on election night, and then have several precinct results added all at once after absentee counting is finished and the results page is refreshed. These are not unexplained dumps of results. This is very much an expected outcome based on the administrative procedures that are taking place and follows a similar pattern from previous election cycles in Minnesota. We anticipate that results will be continuously updated throughout election night and that all results will be reported before breakfast on Wednesday morning. As a reminder, the results posted on election night are always unofficial. It is the summary statements from the polling places and absentee and early voting that comprise the official results. Those summary statements will be closely reviewed and proofed in the days following the election. Results reports will then be presented to the county canvassing boards later this week and the state canvassing board next week to make those results official. And with that, I'll now hand it over to our election security navigator, Bill Ekblad.
Thank you, Mr. Linnell. Good morning. As Paul mentioned, I'm Bill Ekblad, Election Security Navigator with the Secretary of State's office. I've been in this position since 2019. As we've previously discussed, our Election Security Navigator team partners with government agencies and local elections partners across the state to monitor and prepare for physical and cyber threats to our elections. Our office is committed to the concept that providing secure, accessible, and accurate elections is an all-hands evolution. County elections teams depend upon close working relationships with not only their state-level partners like our office, but they also rely heavily upon their own county law enforcement, emergency management, IT, and county attorney partners, among others. This core all-hands approach was a centerpiece of the major election security workshop we hosted at Camp Ripley early last month. We have all practiced and trained for the last several months to think as a team, share information, enlist all available help, and act decisively when required. We believe strongly that our county partners and the state agencies who support them are as prepared and ready as they can be for whatever may come their way tomorrow and over the 2026 election season. Finally, I wanted to say a quick word about cybersecurity. You are all no doubt aware of the recent spate of malicious cyber activity directed against water-related systems across Minnesota and in other states. While election systems, like water systems, are considered to be part of the nation's critical infrastructure, we are not aware of any overlap between that water-related cyber threat activity and our election systems. Nor are we aware of any other malicious cyber activity specifically targeting our election systems at this time. We will continue, of course, to monitor for any signs of a threat and be ready to respond to keep our election systems secure. And with that, you'll now hear from our Voter Outreach Director, Melanie Hazelip. Melanie?
Hello, my name is Melanie Hazelip, and I serve as the Voter Outreach Director for the Office of the Secretary of State. I've been here since 2022. I'm here to let you all know that we currently in our office have staff ready to take your calls to answer any questions you have about voting and elections. You can call us at 1-877-600-VOTE or text at 651-217-3862. And you'll get a live person on the phone to get your questions answered. You won't be subscribed to any lists. You won't hear from us again. You can just get your questions answered from a live person in our office. Making sure that eligible Minnesota voters know how to vote is a main goal for our voter outreach team. We spend our time working with community partners such as businesses, nonprofits, community leaders, schools, anyone willing to partner with us on nonpartisan voter education to inform their communities. We want to get information out such as that there are 3 ways to vote in Minnesota. You can vote early in person, early by mail, or of course on election day. While election day for the primary is tomorrow, for every election, early voting starts 46 days before the election. So you have options. We also work to make sure that voters know about the many great resources and voter tools that we have at mnvotes.gov. You can request an absentee ballot, track that ballot in the mail, look up early vote sites, look up your election day polling location, and find out what's on your ballot so you can be prepared to vote. And I'd like to note that you can actually print off that sample ballot and bring it with you to your polling place as a sort of cheat sheet. The resources that we have at mnvotes.gov are available in 11 different languages, making them available to all Minnesotans. And lastly, I want to answer a question that our team has been asked a lot this year, which is how can I help? The best thing you can do to help this year is just help your networks and your communities stay informed. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation and just plain confusion this year about our elections. And so making sure that your networks have accurate, up-to-date information about what their rights are, what the laws are, and how they can make their voices heard by voting can have a huge impact. Sharing reliable, trusted resources that you can find at mnvotes.gov is an easy way to do this. You can also help someone vote. You can help them make their plan to vote or give them a ride. You can make sure that they know they have the right to time off work to vote without losing their pay, personal time, or vacation time. And lastly, you can get involved in the process by serving as an election judge. We need over 30,000 election judges across the state in a statewide election. And it's a great way to see how elections work, but also to meet your neighbors and to serve your community. You also have a right to serve, you also have a right to be paid to serve as an election judge and a right to time off work to serve. Any eligible Minnesotan can serve as an election judge. And 16 and 17-year-olds can serve as election judge trainees. They too have a right to time off of school to serve, and they have a right to get paid to serve. So if you tell a young person they have a right to skip school and get paid, they're likely going to be interested. We have a one-pager on our website at mnvotes.gov with all of this information on how to help and more. So please visit our website to find out more. Now I'd like to give it back to Secretary Simon.
Before we go to questions, just one last thing. I want to address something else that's been on a lot of Minnesotans' minds lately. I answered some questions about this in the news last week, in fact. As you may know, the Department of Justice has notified certain local governments in our state that they intend to send election monitors to Minnesota polling places, similar to what they've done in other states recently. And I just want to explain to voters what this means. This is not a new process. As we've said before, this has been done the last several election cycles under multiple presidents, including President Biden. And Minnesotans may well have voted at a polling place with a federal observer there and not even noticed a thing. So the stated reason for these observers, and again, not a new thing, is to make sure that jurisdictions are complying with certain provisions of the Voting Rights Act related to voter resources in languages other than English. Also, there's some provisions that they're monitoring having to do with accessibility for voters with a disability. Again, this is not new. This has been done the last several cycles. But I certainly understand why reports of agents of the federal government at the polls would alarm people, especially here in Minnesota, given what we have all gone through over the last several months. So I want to say that we aren't taking anything for granted. Now, both Hennepin and Ramsey County have declined the DOJ's request to allow these observers, as they can under the law. DOJ can announce that they want to send them. Local governments can say, thanks, but no thanks, and they have. They do need that explicit permission under Minnesota law to be in the polling place. But the Department of Justice has affirmed that they will abide by this direction from the counties, but they will also still send people. And they plan to send some small number of people who will stand outside the 100-foot boundaries. So just to clarify, they've asked to be in the polling place. Local jurisdictions said, no, we don't want you in the polling place. And what they're saying is, in small and limited numbers, they will be outside the perimeter where any member of the public can be, whether they're from the DOJ or the neighborhood block club. Anyone can stand outside of the 100-foot barrier outside of a polling place. And these federal employees have already been in other states this election cycle. They were in Michigan last week, and to our knowledge, they were there without any incident. Out of abundance of caution, we are working with the Minnesota Attorney General's office to observe the observers. So they'll be standing outside the 100-foot zone, and we, working with the Attorney General's office, plan to have people watching the watchers just in case, just in case. I think that's a reasonable thing to do given the record of the last several months and the very real concerns and even anxieties that people have about the Justice Department in particular and about the federal government in general when it comes to activity near a polling place or in communities. So we just want to make sure they're abiding by all the rules and laws. Thus far, this election cycle in other states, my understanding is they have. And again, I just want to level set. This is something that's been done for multiple election cycles under multiple presidential administrations for a very narrow purpose to enforce provisions of the Voting Rights Act. So we feel good that this will be uneventful and that our polling places will, as always, be an island of calm. That is our goal. Now we can move to questions. Thanks.
You mentioned that this is something that monitoring has been done under many administrations. Is there a reason you guys are going to be watching the watchers, so to speak, in this particular case?
I think there's well-earned skepticism about the federal government, particularly as to its activities in Minnesota. And I well understand everyday Minnesotans wanting to check on what they say. That said, they have in other states, to my knowledge, behaved themselves. We don't have any reason to believe they'll depart from that record this primary cycle, but we want eyes on the observers, and that's what we're aiming to do. Yeah.
Do they tell you where they're going?
Yes.
So you're not like fishing in the dark trying
No.
to figure out where they're at?
No. And again, we've had contact, including today, with the Department of Justice in our office, and I want to give credits where it's due. They have, as far as we know, been really transparent about the precise places that they plan to go. And so we have every reason to believe that this will go smoothly. But
Where do they want to go? Or where are they?
you know, I personally don't know the precise places. Maybe, I don't know, Paul, can you shed any light on particular places? If not, we could get that. I think we could get that information to you. I don't see why.
Your office is the information.
Right, they've shared with us, or shortly will be, is my understanding, where they intend to go. But I don't know, Paul, do you know, are we at liberty?
I think at this stage, they have indicated they have not yet finalized their plans, but have shared the two counties where they do intend to observe in. So I think we'll be looking to hear more about the specifics later today.
And what are the two counties?
As Secretary Simon, it's Hennepin and Ramsey County.
So they will be sending people.
Right.
And are they going to be dressed in any way or in uniform?
From the discussions that we had, they've indicated that they will not be wearing outwardly visible insignias, but they will have identification on them, and will only be asking questions of voters after they have already exited the polling place, not anyone who has not yet gone in to vote.
So just to clarify, they're only interested in those two counties, and both those counties also said no thank you to letting the observers in some places.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
And they will be asking voters questions as they leave the polls. What should voters know about the question when they leave the polls?
Well, I think as Secretary Simon noted, I think this follows a pattern in other states that has been very normal based on the laws that are in place there. In Minnesota, the ability to observe, but as Secretary Simon mentioned, both counties have declined to allow them in the polling place, but anyone can be outside of the polling place. The questions asked, any voter can choose not to answer questions, could continue on their way with the rest of their day. If they wish to speak with the folks from the Department of Justice, I think we would expect just a civil conversation asking how their voting experience was, if they had any issues being able to cast their ballot. In particular, looking at the provisions in federal law that they might be interested in assessing.
Do they have to identify themselves to the voter? I mean, I just wondering if voters are going to be concerned about this being approached. Can you explain the process? Like, they're just going to go up to voters randomly, or?
I think the expectation is that they would identify themselves. There's not, I think, a formal process in state law that says outside of that 100 feet, here are the what you must present to a voter. But I think the expectation is that they have their identification presence on their persons and would be identifying themselves before entering into any questions. Of course, yes. At that point, they would have already cast their ballot and are, like the same as anyone. They're free to continue on their way.
You mentioned that this has happened in the past. Are you aware of counties saying no thank you in the past?
Yes, it's happened for the last several election cycles, mostly in the general election. I believe it may have occurred a time or two in the primary, and I think there have been examples. We can get you that information. I don't remember offhand where counties have said no. But again, remember, outside of the 100-foot perimeter, any member of the public, news media, exit pollster, anyone can hang out there.
Mr. Secretary, on a more fundamental issue, are voters reminded when they go into this open primary state and only vote on one side of the ballot, otherwise they can end up spoiling their ballot?
That's right. One of the advantages of voting in person is if a voter makes a mistake in that regard, or any regard, they'll be notified of that and they can have a do-over, right? But to your particular question, Tom, yes, we want people to understand, and they will be made aware in the polling place in prominent ways that you got to stick to a particular party to the extent there's a partisan contest. A voter can't, of course, say, hey, in this contest, I'm going to vote among the DFLers, and this other contest, I'm going to vote among the Republicans. You can't do that. You have to stick to a particular lane for the partisan contest. Now, remember, not all the contests are partisan. So for those, a voter is free to go back and forth, but you cannot vote in a DFL partisan contest and then also vote in a different Republican partisan contest.
Have you had some spoiled ballots in previous years because of this, people not understanding?
Yes, yes. And I don't know the numbers this time. Maybe Paul can illuminate.
I don't know about specific numbers, but this is always something that comes up with primary elections, that there is a certain rate of ballots that would be spoiled because someone has crossed over. Important to note, as Secretary Simon indicated, the voting equipment is programmed to alert the voter to that. If they have inserted their ballot and they have crossed over, they're given the opportunity to take that ballot back, get a new one, and fix it. They can always choose to cast it if they wish, but the reminder is there on polling place posters, on the instructions on the ballot itself, and then sort of that last chance if they did make a mistake and inserted it into the ballot counter.
Do you have any sense of like what, are they going to be at every precinct? What percentage of precincts are they going to be at? Do you have any sense? I mean, you must.
Yeah, Mr. Linnell, I think, can say a little bit about that. We're talking probably about one or two handfuls, I think, something like that, a pretty small number.
In each county? Or total?
Possibly. They haven't, again, told a total, I think. They haven't told us the specifics yet, but we're not talking about a cast of thousands here.
Would this be the most mail-in ballots in a non-presidential primary? How many more mail-in ballots did we see than the previous record?
That I am not sure about. You've stumped me there. Do you happen to know, Mr. Linnell?
I don't know that I have the precise numbers. We actually do have the absentee and early voting statistics on our webpage that we could pull. I want to say it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 160,000 or so, but can cross-reference those numbers. But we're already past that number and expect to see that continuing to rise as early voting will be busy through the close of polls today, and then mail and absentee ballots continue to be accepted today and through tomorrow.
What do you suspect is behind that sort of high mark? Do you think it's more of what's going on with politics today? People are more interested in this. Do you think administrative changes over the last 12 years, that's some changes to that?
Honestly, I think it's hot races. That's it. That tends to really drive primary turnout in Minnesota. You know, it's always a little ironic that at times Minnesota has been #1 in America in voter turnout in the general election, but in the preceding primary, turnout was very low, and that's almost always dictated to a very large extent by what and who is on the ballot. If there are contests that animate and excite people, that they're passionate about, and or that are very closely contested. They're very competitive, where the outcome isn't necessarily known. That tends to really drive turnout. So it really comes down to contests that people are excited about. In my judgment, that's been the historical pattern.
I know the numbers are not off the top of your head, but looking at the split, slightly more cast in person early versus mail-in. Is that any kind of new trend? Are more people voting early in person, or do we know anything on that?
I think that's right. I think the data does show that more people are voting early in person. That was a trend we saw in the 2024 general election, and I think are continuing to see now. To the question of some of the recent law changes, we do have a growing permanent absentee list, so that in terms of some of the mail numbers increasing, that would account for some of that. But also this being the first election now where across the state every voter has the opportunity to insert their ballot directly into a ballot counter those last 18 days through the early voting process. Seems like that's a very popular option, and we've seen a lot of voters taking advantage of that across the state.
So again, I think you mentioned that in your first comment. You said this was the first time they've been able to do that, insert it into the thing and then find out whether it's legit or spoiled or.
It is just similar to the polling place experience. Rather than putting it into the envelopes and waiting for a ballot board to do the accepting and rejecting, many counties did offer this option. It was optional, though. This is the first year where it's a slightly different set of laws that were passed in 2023 to define the early voting process, and is required at every county across the state. So every voter has the same chance to insert their ballot into a tabulator as any other county would have previously.
In 18 days.
In the 18 days, exactly. Yep.
This is the first year of that?
Correct. Yep.
Sticking with the numbers for a second, is it typical to see that many uncast absentee mail-in ballots the day before, I guess, particularly in this case, a primary?
Well, I think it's a good question. My guess is the data would bear out probably similar numbers in terms of the requested and the rate of return for a primary election. It would in terms of the volume, that would likely point to both our voters in mail ballot jurisdictions and with the permanent absentee list. They're all automatically receiving that ballot for each election for which they're eligible to vote. So there's more ballots going out by mail. Whether or not the rates of return are the same as in previous years, that count has grown. I think we would expect overall the rate of return and the participation by mail to go up in part because of those.
This could be kind of what you were just saying just there, but is there I mean, that's almost exactly the same amount of ballots you guys have received in early voting so far. That's a pretty high mark.
I would say the other piece we do have today and tomorrow, so we'd expect to continue to see those numbers coming back in as voters are returning their ballots. But I think we know just overall in terms of primary voter participation versus a general election, the idea that count might be, the percentage of return might be lower is not maybe altogether surprising.
Well, the Attorney General's personnel that are watching the federal observers, will they be wearing anything in particular that will readily identify them? In one of the locations people are being sent to Cedar Riverside.
Well, I'll ask the second part first. We don't know. They haven't gotten to that granular level yet, but my understanding is they will disclose where they are going. In terms of any attire or any identifying marks or clothing, I guess I don't know the answer to that. I would defer to them.
Can you talk a little bit more about the counting process for the early vote and absentee ballots, and kind of how you ensure the integrity of that count? Do you start before election day, or do you start counting after the polls close?
Good question. So all of those procedures are really defined in state statute and rule about how the early voting ballots that are cast are balanced and counted, as well as the absentee ballot board review of any absentee and mail ballots to determine that they were returned by the person to whom they were sent. Within that 18-day period, that's when those envelopes can start to be opened and ballots can actually be fed through a ballot counter. So the same day that early voting starts, that's when mailed and returned absentee ballots can start being fed through ballot counters at that time. But it's not until 8 p.m. after the close of polls that any counting is actually taking place. It's just kind of a pre-tabulation process. But each step along the way, there is a review, there's a balance to ensure that the number of ballots cast match the expected numbers so that the counts are verified at each step along the way before on election night. Then they're completing those summary statements of their results to actually validate the results that that are printed on election night. So it's then the two-step process where once those absentee and early voting totals are generated, they get married together with their polling place results, and at that point they get posted through the state's election reporting system and published on our election night reporting site.
Because there's so many outstanding absentee ballots, are you expecting this all to move more slowly in terms of results being released because the counties have to merge these two?
It's possible that there will be late arriving ballots. I think one of the law changes was return to absentee ballots in person do need to be back by 5 p.m. So that's a little bit of an earlier deadline from 2024 when it was 8 p.m. across the board. So that might help to precipitate a little bit earlier counting, but we do think that takes some time. So for any of those late arriving absentee ballots, or if there's later USPS drop-offs, to do that ballot board review, the feeding through the ballot counters, and again, the steps to validate that that person has not cast a ballot at the polling place does take some time. So we expect a handful of precincts to begin reporting after 8 p.m. and then likely kind of a bigger cascade of precincts that will start rolling in.
So 5 p.m. is for the hand return.
Correct.
And will people just be told, sorry, you're going to have to go vote in person?
If a voter were to attempt to bring their ballot back after 5 p.m., they'd be told that they cannot be accepted at that point. If it's an absentee ballot, that they would need to go to their polling place and vote there during the last 3 hours that they are open. Voters in mail ballot jurisdictions who are automatically sent a ballot to them, they have until 8 p.m. to bring their ballots back.
On the cybersecurity front, the comment I believe was that we're not aware of any bigger threat. Is there a level of communication there with the feds on the cybersecurity threats that may or may not be out there? Is it any different this year? I had heard that there may not be as much communication. So what's the confidence level in knowing the threat that's out there?
Thanks, great question. And I think it's important to realize that there are a lot of different sources of cyber threat information, and there always have been. We probably grew to rely heavily on our federal partner relationships over the last several years because they were readily available and strong and well-informed partners. But we have a lot of other partners, private sector, nonprofits, our state partners, some and many, maybe most of whom have other access to federal partner information and relationships as well. So to answer your question, we do have some channels to get to federal partners through our state partners, and we do have some direct contacts in certain context for cyber threat information in the general category of how the federal government supports state and local governments. So it's just that very specific, narrow, like election stuff that the relationship's a little different than it used to be, but for which we have gone and found other sources and other partners to help shore up any gaps that might have been created. So that's a long way of saying we feel confident about the information we have access to. It's different. The sources are different. The relationships are different. But I wouldn't say that there's any degradation or any lessening that we're aware of. The caveat in cybersecurity is like all security, I guess, you never quite know what's around the corner. And I think the federal government would admit that as well, that things can come up you don't see coming. So we can only do what we can do with what we have, and we feel pretty good that we've made up any gaps that may have been produced over the last years.
What percent turnout would you be shocked by?
Maybe the starting point for that question is the modern day high for a primary was 2018, where it was somewhere between 22 and 23%. That again was due, at least in my judgment, to some really compelling contests. There was a gubernatorial primary that year on both sides. There were other races that captivated people and that were otherwise close. All that is to say, I think if we met or exceeded that, that would be pretty extraordinary. That would be the new modern day high.
Representative Finstad sent you a letter recently. If you're aware of that, can you give any comment?
Yeah, no, he sent us a letter on Friday, which is his right. We're going to get back to him soon. It's not a new issue. He and other members of the Minnesota congressional delegation have, within the last couple of years, on one or multiple times, asked us about the same general area. We'll be responding to him very shortly. The answer is not going to be groundbreakingly new in the sense that the law is the law, and we'll just say that again.
The federal observers, can they document, videotape, take pictures, or do they?
Yes, I think they can, but I have not heard of any instance where they have done that, and nor they've announced any intention to do that. Outside of the 100-foot perimeter, any member of the public can do those kinds of things, as long as they're not harassing, threatening, intimidating. They can record things. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.